Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Recently I received my Hello Bluebird order, so in the upcoming cards you can expect a lot of Hello Bluebird cards. So this one is my first one and therefore I am using the little painters from Hello Bluebird. It's an adorable stamp set that is mostly Easter related, but I took some images that weren't holding an egg, and this way I am just creating some sort of a whimsical rainbow card. I am going to do some no-line coloring using my distress inks, and as you can see here I am stamping my images on a piece of Strathmore Bristol Smooth that I have die cut using my basic rectangles from MOMMA Elephant. There are different inks where you can do no-line coloring with, like the Ink on 3 or from the Stamp Market, and other brands also have created a no-line coloring ink in the meanwhile. But distress inks are really cheap, or in my opinion you can get a lot distress inks when you buy the small ones. And you can perfectly use the antique linen to create a no-line coloring card. So that's why I am stamping it out with antique linen, because this card is only with distress inks. It's also a way of showing that in my case these were my first supplies that I had, and you can do whatever you want with your supplies as long as you put your mind to it. So I'm going to show also in my upcoming cards that distress inks are a perfect medium for those who haven't gotten their hands on any markers or so. You don't necessarily need them. Sometimes it can be handy, but distress inks work perfect as well. So now on to the no-line coloring. I am doing some watercoloring as I am smooshing my distress inks onto my acrylic block. I have put underneath a paper cloth. This is because it's a white one and you can see through my acrylic block, so that you definitely get to see the real color of the distress ink that you are using. And then of course it's also handy that the parts that are sticking from underneath the acrylic block, you can dab your paintbrush on top of it if it's too wet after cleaning or anything else. What I am doing, and I'm not an expert in watercoloring, but this is a way that works for me, and it's a way that I like the result, so I'm showing you my way. But definitely if you do something else, then just stick to it if that works better. But I am adding my color, really pigmented color, so I didn't use a lot of water on my paintbrush. I add that on the spaces where I think there should be some shadow, so I'm adding a lot of ink there, mostly on the edges of course, tracing the image itself, and then I take a bit of water on top of my paintbrush, but really a little. I want to have the control, and then I drag out that color and I soften it more and more, and then I come back in doing exactly the same as I did before and just keep adding layers and layers until I am happy with the depth created and the shadows that are there. Also about the shadows, I'm just doing what feels right. I am not an expert in creating shadows. It's not like I sketch it out in front. I just go with it. Sometimes I think, okay, so here's an image and the rest is behind it. I need to add a shadow, and then sometimes think, oh, okay, on the bottom of the face I want some shadow and then I just go with it. So it's not completely realistic if you look at shadowing and such. As long as the result is how you like it, that's important. So since the rest of the images are colored in quite the same, I will be putting on some music and I will be back after all the main images are colored in, and then I will explain some more. So that were sort of the main images, and now I'm continuing with the background. So my original idea was to give these images something to sit on or to stand on, and I wanted it to be rainbow color. So here I'm smooshing some of my favorite distress inks to create a rainbow on top of my acrylic block. And the idea was also to get it really whimsical. I didn't want a straight edge where the rainbow was coming from. The idea in my mind is that the images are coloring their own sort of grounding. So you will also see in the details that that it's not a duck, that little chicken is sort of having a red paintbrush and it's painting his own way, and then the bunny is sitting on the orange, there is an orange bow, and then his paintbrush is hanging over the yellow area and such. So I try to mimic the colors that the images are sitting or standing on in their details. So what I do for this background is I roughly sketch a really whimsical straight border, and then I drag that color out just the same as I did with the images. And I'm also going this way when painting the accessories. So for the orange, I realized that my dried marigold wasn't dark enough, so spiced marmalade came to the rescue, and then I just continued. Now at the left, you cannot see it, but there is of course my cup with water. I was always drying off my paintbrush on the edges, and sometimes I had some watery splotches that were getting onto my card. And it's not that big of a deal, it wasn't with any color or anything, but I knew that they were there. So the idea was to leave it with the rainbow, as you see now, but I couldn't leave it this way. It's like, I think you all can understand it. If you ask to someone close to you, like, do you like this one? And he's like, oh yeah, it's pretty, it's amazing, if that's the case already, but it's not always that my fiance is saying that, unfortunately, but okay, it's his opinion. But this time he was like, oh yeah, that's really really nice, and I was like, no, don't you see the splatters? I mean, come on. I was like, it's not realistic. So I couldn't get my head around it, and after painting my rainbow completely, you will see what the solution was, and you probably saw it already in the beginning of this video, but I am going to splatter some ink because there was splatter, so I'm just making it worse, but now the way I want it to be, so I have sort of control of these splatters, and therefore I'm using exactly the same colors as I did in my rainbow, and I will also be masking off my images because I don't want any blue or greens to get on the yellow of my little chickens. That's not the idea. So I roughly masked it off with some scrap piece of paper that I teared apart. And with those splatters I could live, and they also mask off those splatters that I didn't want. Because it gets sort of messy and they just don't stand out anymore. Now that the splattering is done, I had some items that I wanted to fix, like some shadows on top of the accents. Those legs weren't that visible anymore with all the red. And then I also have those paintbrushes left. There is like that little piece, and when I watch my paintbrushes, it's like a metal-ish sort of material. So I took this art metal pale gold ink that I have, and I just added it on those small pieces. It's not that visible at first glance, but if you turn this card towards the light and such, you can really see it better, and it shines really bright. And when I'm done with all these little details that I wanted to fix, I just need to adhere this on top of a card base to make sure that I wouldn't smudge anything, because I do that a lot. It's like my life. I cannot wait long enough for everything to dry each time. I'm just impatient. But this time I took so much time to create this card, I didn't want to mess it up. So took my heat gun, heated everything, hopefully long enough, but in the end it appears I did. And because of the heating up, my panel was a bit warped. And then you can do lots of things. You can put it under a book or anything like that, something heavy to flatten it out. Or if you are impatient as me, you just take some foam tape. You have more control of foam tape, in my opinion, than with liquid glue. Then you would still have to add that book. But with foam tape, it sort of straightened out your panel. So I took this big MOMMA foam tape roll that I have from Simon's Stamp, and I just adhered it on top of my card base using this tape roll. As I lately always do, I am using my craft knife to help me getting that backing off, which is really helpful, and it saves me so much time. It's like crazy. And then I can adhere it to my A2 size card base, and then this card is finished. So I really hope that you like this video and all the coloring. I know it's a bit longer than lately, but I couldn't speed it up any faster, because then you wouldn't see anything of the coloring, and for some people it can really be helpful. So I hope that you liked it. I hope that you liked the card design as well, that you had fun watching this video, and hopefully I will see you next time as well. Bye!